Hi everyone, my name is Michelle. I'm a therapist in the Seattle, Washington area with my practice, Next Chapter Counseling. And I'm going to be answering the question today about whether it's okay to stay in touch with an ex after the relationship has ended. I made a previous video quite a while ago about how to handle it if you have to stay in touch with an ex, right? Because you guys share children together, maybe you're coworkers, or you have to see this person. But what about situations which are far more common when you don't have to maintain any contact with this person after the relationship after the relationship ends, but maybe there's a part of you that does. And is it okay to want to stay in touch with them, or should you really truly cut ties entirely to move on? So, I'm going to give you guys a couple different questions to think about related to this so that you can come to a decision that feels good for you about whether staying in touch is something that you want to do with this relationship ending, or whether it is best to cut all ties and move forward. So the first thing that I think it's really important to ask yourself is, what's the purpose for staying in touch? Why do you want to keep this person in your life? I have a friend of mine, she's a pretty close friend, and for a long time, whenever she would break up with someone, she would always say, I want to be friends with you. And then, like 2 weeks later, she was trying to go to the movies with them. And I was kind of like, why? But ultimately, part of it was because she didn't want to feel like the bad guy. She didn't want to feel like a horrible person for breaking up with these people and then refusing to ever see them again. And that was part of it for her. So there may be different reasons for why you want to stay in touch with your ex. And staying in touch with your ex can be pretty broad. Staying in touch might look like you comment on their photos on Facebook every now and then, or staying in touch might mean you go to coffee together. Like, it could look very different. But anytime you're interacting with your ex, I think it is really important to ask yourself this question of, like, why? Why am I choosing to have this interaction with them? And whatever answer you give is, more or less okay. I think it's just important for you to be aware of what your answer is, and that it is something to examine and look closer at if it's a similar answer to my friend's situation, where you're really just doing this because it's hard to say goodbye to people. That's not necessarily a good enough reason. What is this person adding to your life? And can they still add that to your life even when they are your ex? There's a common expression out there of, like, people are exes for a reason. And to decide if having this person in your life still adds anything. Does it do anything for you to stay in touch, or is it really not adding much at all? And then is there not much of a point to it now that you guys are no longer a couple? So that's an important thing to ask yourself first and foremost. Why? Why are we staying in touch? Why do we want to go to coffee together? What is this about? And just see what answer comes up. The second question that I recommend asking yourself is asking, what is going to be different now that the two of you are not a couple anymore? Part of why I asked my friend, like, why she was doing what she was doing with trying to maintain contact with her exes, was because it almost sounded like she wanted to go on dates with them. It almost sounded, she's like, oh yeah, I want to, we made plans for a couple weeks from now to go to dinner and a movie. And I'm like, what? So to ask yourself, what is going to look different now? It may be, for example, that you decide you're going to maintain contact with your ex because you guys are part of a similar group of friends and it would just be too weird to try to cut all ties with them. But maybe you decide you're only going to see each other in group situations. Or maybe you decide that you're only going to have contact with them via social media, but you're not going to ever see them in person again. Figuring out what is going to be different, because if it's going to basically be that you guys just continue on doing the same things that you used to do when you were a couple, going to the same places, doing the same activities, spending just as much time together as you did when you were together, it's not going to look much different. And it is important that now that the romantic relationship has ended between the two of you, you guys sort of reinvent and determine what a platonic relationship is going to look like, if you both are on board with maintaining and wanting to stay in touch. Again, see question 1 about figuring out why you each want to do that. But then to really determine what it's going to look like and how it's going to be different. Maybe you guys don't talk on the phone anymore, but maybe you guys still decide to text or something like that. But there should be key changes that take place so that it doesn't feel like a relationship anymore when it's over. And the third thing to ask yourself, the final question here is like, is it worth it, right? Especially if you start a new relationship and if your current partner doesn't really like that you're still in touch with your ex, or things like that. Or if you find yourself of like, you hang out with your ex, but then you just don't feel quite great afterwards, or whatever it is, like to really ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth it to me to keep this person who is now arguably part of my past because they're an ex? Is it worth it to keep that person in my life if it's going to affect my present relationship or relationships I could have in the future? And if it has that potential, that's a really big thing to look at, is if it's going to negatively impact a relationship that you are now beginning currently or a relationship you could have down the line. And most of the time, again, it's going to be different for each situation, but most of the time the answer is probably going to be no. It's not worth it to keep an ex around if keeping that person in your life is either dragging you down, not benefiting you, or interfering with you being able to connect fully with your next partner. Different people have different views on this. Some people have no problem if you're in touch with your exes. It doesn't bother them a bit. And other people, they may really not like that. And of course, it's important to talk with them about, answers number 1 and 2, right? Like answer why you're wanting to still have this person in your life, what you guys have changed about your relationship so that it's different. And if you have a partner, though, that still feels really uncomfortable with the idea, rather than pointing the finger at them and saying, well, you should be comfortable with me, whoever I want to be with, you should just be okay with it, is to maybe really look at, yeah, who would I rather have in my life, this new person or this person from before? And decide from there what feels good to you with who to keep around. So those are the 3 things that I recommend. It's really just an exercise in thinking through some things before making a decision to keep your ex around or not. There isn't really truly a right or wrong answer. Just make sure it's a thoughtful one. Really think about why you're wanting to do it, what's going to be different, and is it worth it to you if it is going to impact other relationships in your life or impact you potentially negatively too. If you have a question for me about love or relationships, send me an email, nextchapter.michelle@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone. Bye.